Well, let's talk about a common issue that's being discussed today, that of police in schools. We know that in the new school term, some high-risk schools were selected to have police put in them, and some people were not comfortable with it. Some love the idea for various reasons. I myself, well, let me not say what I was thinking, but I do know the concerns people have about police in school. Most of us, when asked, would not want our children to be in a school that feels like a police state. But then you've got others who say, I prefer to have police than be worried about what might be happening to my child in that school. Unfortunately, there's a psychological effect. If children see police, what does that say about them as an individual? What does that say about their environment? Is it an environment they want to stay in even? And then there are some children in certain schools that will only have one security guard who's a friend with everyone, and those children have never experienced being around police. Do we want our children to be raised in an environment where police are everywhere? How does that affect them psychologically? There's a lot of things to unpack in that regard, and I'm not going to get into all of that today, but I do know that there's great concern about whether this is a good idea or not. That said, I'm talking about this purely from the education point of view and the child's point of view, not the politics, not how well are the police trained, not the whole nitty-gritty of how it's been implemented. I'm talking purely from the children's point of view and education. I spoke to a principal last week in one of the schools that is deemed high-risk secondary school, and I went to the school and they do have police there. They were there from the time assembly was going on. And I asked the principal how she felt about it, because I was really curious. I mean, these are the people on the ground. They're the ones that face the issues, so their voice matters. And it's interesting. Her comment to me was, I can relax. She said to me that usually she misses lunch. She doesn't get lunch. She has to patrol the school every lunch hour to make sure that everything is in order. She said she can finally breathe, relax, and even get other things done that are her responsibility. So it's a weight off her shoulders. And you know what? I can relate to that. I can understand what she means. But then my mind started to go, should it have reached this point? What has led us to this situation where we have such a situation that some schools just need policing? In some people's mind, they need policing. Or do they really need policing? Do they need the strong hand? Why did it reach the point where they need that strong hand, when really it's children, many under the age of 18, who just need an education? How did it reach this bad? Number one, family. Definitely family. But I'm going to look at it from the point of the academic end, the school end, because again, there's a lot to unpack on this topic. I can't touch every topic about this. But here's the thing. The schools that have less issues, and people might argue, those schools have issues, they just sweep it under the rug, keep it, or not necessarily sweep it under the rug, but they keep it quiet, because they don't want the public to know that this so-called prestigious school or a school of high repute really has these issues. Every school has issues. You know what? The Bible says foolishness is tied up in the heart of the boy, and it is true. Their brain isn't fully yet developed, and they do make poor judgment choices. And because of that, they need, first of all, supervision. One of the issues in our schools is lack of eyes on the children. We're taking children, many of them hormonal, they're young, they're now growing up, they have their egos of youth, and we're putting them together without supervision, because a lot of the issues that happen in schools, in classrooms, in fighting that happens is when the adults' eyes are not on them. When I was a child, I remember that in the school I went to, eyes were always on us. This was done in that teachers were given shifts. Teachers were volunteered their lunch hours and took shifts, and you had teachers who would patrol and monitor during the lunch hour. But because of the shift system approach that the teachers took, it didn't fall all on one person to do it. And therefore the school had a more calm environment. So my question is, why is it teachers are not put more in that position where they can patrol? Now, I hear you. Teachers would say, I have my lunch hour, it's my lunch hour. I was a teacher, and I remember that a principal that I had wanted to schedule teachers during the lunch hour to help make sure behaviour was good among the children during the lunch hour. And he was preparing the schedule, and the argument was, this is not in our portfolio as teachers, and I will only do this if I get paid more. Fair enough. But is it always about the money? There are other factors that I don't want to get too political about this. I think it boils down to caring. Caring, long and short. Do we care enough about our children? Now, there are times you need strong handling. And when that principal told me that she could now relax a bit, I get what she was saying, because sometimes you need a strong hand to make sure that there's peace in the school, and one principal cannot do it. It has to be teamwork. And since that wasn't happening, police were brought in. That's not the only issue though, eyes on the children. All children don't need eyes on them because of other factors. One, their upbringing. Some children's homes environment make sure they don't misbehave. It wouldn't cross their mind to go down a certain route that they were not raised to do. But because children are still developing their part of their brain for good judgment, even children who are raised in good, so-called good homes, or homes where they're trained to behave in a certain way, when those same children are around their friends and eyes are not on them, they fall right in, and may also do foolishness that you didn't expect of that child in an environment where eyes are on them and where homes are stable. So children need eyes on them. The question is, did we have to reach it to the point with police being the eyes on them? Could checks and balances have been put in within the school staff that already exists? Because again, do we want an environment where the children feel as if that they're not being trusted? Because the reality is, it's not all the children that are bad. Often I find it's just a handful that spoil it for everyone else. But that said, the eyes need to be on them. And if the police can help prevent the few from disrupting the education of the many, then that may be argued to be worth it. But here's the other thing. Why are some schools so disruptive beyond the home not taking care of their part in training the children morally? Could it be that the children themselves are just lost in what they're doing? Why am I here? Academically, I'm struggling. The facts are that children who do not flourish academically tend to be those that give the most trouble. There are exceptions, don't get me wrong. So what's going on academically in schools that are causing children to lose total interest and fill in the blank with misbehaviour? I've got some data here to think about. For SEA, the SEA results, the secondary school entrance exam that's done in Trinidad and Tobago. It's interesting that in 2023, 18,700 plus children did the exam. The English language results was 61%. That was the score. The creative writing, the composition writing, was 53.4%. That was the average pass rate. And the math score was 50.4% was the pass rate, the average. Now people say, okay, they passed. Since when was 50% actually the pass rate? If you think about it, the secondary school entrance exam tests the skills the children need to function in a secondary school. The reality is, if you're scoring 50% in math, it doesn't mean you've passed math. It means you don't know 50% of your primary school math work. You don't know half of primary school. Primary means most important, the foundation. What is the most significant knowledge you need in order to function in society? If you're entering secondary school only knowing half of your math, slightly half of your, you don't know 40% of your language, English language skills, the language that is around you. Okay, there's the dialect, but children know the standard because they watch all the foreign TV as well. So they can act on what they call the language continuum. And yet still, they don't know 40% of language arts. And their writing skills, composition writing skills, is only about 53%. That they cannot function fully as writers of the English language. Then does that not tell us that they're entering secondary school only knowing essentially half of the foundation that they need? And then they have to add on to that all the different subjects in secondary school. When the English, the language, the composition writing, they can only function essentially about half of the primary school work. So therefore, you bring them in to an environment where they don't know enough of the foundation. The secondary school teachers are proficient in their subject areas. And then, because the exam is a streaming exam, you're now combining the weakest of the children all together. And they don't know enough of their primary school to then begin doing secondary school work, and then combine that with the hormones and lack of eyes on them during perhaps their lunch period and their break period, or when they don't have a subject. It's the perfect storm. We need to figure this out. And I think, in all honesty, the primary school level is being forgotten and ignored in some way. It is. When last have you gone into a primary school? Not the newer built ones, the rest of them. The facilities are not even conducive enough to develop dynamic learning. It's a lot put on primary school teachers who have to teach all the subjects, and sometimes in spaces that are hot, dusty, crowded, with limited resources. And sorry to say, some teachers, in spite of even having degrees, have limited practical teaching in the subject. A lot of academic teaching of the skills of primary school teaching, but not enough hands-on practical teaching. So you combine all that, you put them in the school system in secondary school, and then we expect good behaviour of all. We as the adults have failed in some way. We need to check the simple things, the smaller things, the things that I don't think are discussed enough to help improve learning in our school system, and therefore the behaviour. Quick story. I was in a project that was sponsored by British Gas and then Shell in the Laventille Beetham, East Port of Spain area. And there was a particular school where the reputation, primary school I focused on, foundation level. We dealt with the reading of the infants in standard 1, the first 3 years of school, and we helped the teachers with our strategies. And this school had only 2 male teachers on staff. And within the first year of our project there, the 2 male teachers left the school, and the rest of the staff were worried. They were worried, what will happen to our school? We already struggle with behaviour. We're struggling with behaviour in the school. What will happen to us now that our only 2 male teachers are gone? I mean, this is a school where, in my first time there, my first year being there, one of the older students got into a brawl, a shouting match with the male teacher, tried to pick up a massive stone and throw it at him. The guard had to get involved, and the student ran off the compound, threatening to bring a gun for the teacher. And of course, school had to end right there and then, and tutor had to be called in, and whoever else authorities had to be called in. A while after, that student, upon leaving the school, was known to be a gun runner for the gangs in the area, and was later involved in a killing a couple of years later. So this is the environment I'm talking about. However, even though the two male teachers left the school and the rest of the staff, the female staff, were worried, an interesting thing happened in the school. By the third year of that school's conduct, academics, behaviour began to flourish for one main reason. The academic level of the school began to grow as we changed the teaching strategies, approaches, and the principal doggedly stuck with it. So again, we cannot underestimate the fact that children's behaviour is directly related to the academic ability of the students, because those students still came from the same homes, the same broken environments, but yet still the school's environment improved. The behaviour improved. Because the thing we could change as educators was the learning. That's the power we had. We couldn't go into the homes because that's another issue. There's social workers and other issues involved. But we could change the learning. So if our children are going up to secondary school, not knowing half their primary school work, what do we expect? And some schools, the academic level is even less than knowing. Some schools, the children know only 30%, don't know 70%, 3/4 of primary school, but they have to start secondary school. So there's a correlation, and we cannot ignore it. Our teaching strategies have to change, but sometimes we need to be strong-handed in the beginning. Does it have to be perpetual? Should it go on forever, is the question. A movie I think everyone should watch is a movie from, what was it? I have it, so 1989, I think it was, starring Morgan Freeman. It was called, was it Lean on Me? This movie was based on a true story. It was based on a principal who they used to call Crazy Joe Clark. He went into a school in New Jersey, the USA, the worst high school in New Jersey, and he turned it around academically, behavior-wise. But the first thing he did was actually get a baseball bat and put out of the school every single drug-pushing child and gang-related child. He put them out of school. It was against the authorities' rules. He got into a lot of trouble. He did it strong-handedly. I'm not saying to put children out of the schools, but I'm saying he had to get rid of the problem, the behavior. So he took a strong-handed approach, but he didn't do that alone. Not that I agreed with everything he did, but he did. It just made sense because he was in such a desperate situation. Kind of reminds me of the police in schools, desperate situation. But he combined it with changing the teaching approach. He encouraged academia. He encouraged real learning. Start from where they are and let's get these students learning because they have the ability. Let's get it going. So he did a two-prong approach. He took a strong-handed approach to get rid of the problems for the sake of the rest of the school so they can learn. Then he took the approach of, now let's get the academic going. And it worked. They made a movie out of it. It was a good movie. I think every educator should watch that movie. I think it's called Lean on Me, yeah. So that's my thought for today about what's going on in the education system. Lots of other thoughts can come. Tell me if you have a thought that you'd like us to discuss. But at the end of every session, let's discuss some questions about learning. These questions are based on teaching of young children reading. Here's a question. Do we need phonics to learn to read? No, but it is very important. Here's another question. Can a child begin to read books without knowing any phonics? Yes, it's possible. Children can actually learn using something called sight words you just need to know by sight. You just need to know what it is, even if you don't know why. So the word mummy is mummy. I know it. It looks like the word mummy. I don't need to know the letter sounds of or the Y in order to know the word is mummy. I just know it by sight memory. So you can learn thousands of words by memory and still read, even if you don't know any phonics or how letters sound. Here's another one. Can a child become too phonics dependent? Yes, they can. Some children think that they have to sound out every single word, even if they know it by memory. And it slows down their fluency and therefore comprehension. So if we focus only on the phonics and ignore the fact that there are other aspects such as sight word recognition, then the child can become too phonics dependent. It does happen, so we have to be careful. And here's another one. One more question. Should we call words that are not phonetical tricky words? So there are some words that you can't read by sounding out, like the word said. The middle part, AI, sounds like an eh. In fact, it's AI. So it's not a real purely phonetical word. So we might call that a tricky word. I don't really like the word tricky because you're subconsciously telling the children this is kind of a difficult word. That's if you only teach with phonics alone. So I say blend the two, teach phonics and sight word recognition in a seamless manner, and it takes the stress off the reading and they become less phonics dependent, but I can get more into that another time. So those are some questions for today. If you have any questions about education or a hot topic on education, let me know and we'll discuss it.